Morning, everyone. Welcome to our next expert how-to session. Great to have you here for the October version, and our year is rapidly passing us by. So only this and one more to go for this year, and so thrilled to be joining you again for this session, and looking to have a fun discussion with our guest today about an area that I know consumes a lot of attention for a lot of entrepreneurs, and that is the whole space of social media. Of course, for everybody who's joining live will know that the best results will come from putting up the do not disturb sign, turning off the phones, grabbing your pen and paper, and being ready to engage in the conversation. So feel free to ask your questions either via text or throw up your hand, and I'll open the line so you can have a yarn with our guest. Now, our conversation today is really all around how are we going to improve our ability to connect our web and social strategies to get much more success from those two pathways. So to help us do that, we've got a web and social media marketing specialist, Steve Hubbard, with us on the line. And Steve has been doing this work for a long time, and has built a fantastic business around helping people to improve their ability to do that. So I was keen to get him on and have a chat with all of the Marketers Club members about some of the ideas and strategies of how we can do that more effectively. So good morning, Stephen. Welcome to the call.
G'day, Paul. Thanks for the opportunity to share.
No, it's great to have you on the line, man. I appreciate you taking some time out of what I know is a busy schedule, a busy time in your business. So I appreciate you being so generous to come on and share some of your wisdom. Now, maybe before we dive into our conversation, and that's what it's going to be today, is a conversation rather than a presentation. We're going to be just riffing around and having a jam about all things web and websites and social media and their interactions and the mistakes we can make, and how we can start to do some of that more effectively, and also get our mindset right about what to expect from that activity. But perhaps before we dive in, maybe you can give us the Steve Hubbard story, a little bit of who you are, the business you run, so we understand who we're listening to.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, well, basically, I fell into marketing in many ways. I have an undergrad in sport and recreation, and so back in 2010, after many years in local government, went back and did a master's in marketing at Monash Uni. Completed that in 2012, and found that someone with 15 years in local government wasn't necessarily the best person to be running the AFL's marketing department, or Nike, or something along those lines, which most marketers go in there for. But I did find myself working initially with the Melbourne Tigers, which is the NBL team here in Melbourne. And one of the things that was always of great interest to me was sponsorship marketing. And I saw a real opportunity, if you like, for small businesses that were supporting their local communities, be they sporting teams, art, schools, whatever it might well be, how they could leverage that off with their social media. And so, yeah, since about 2013, effectively, I've been consulting largely to small business, probably a couple of hundred now, as well as had some really good case studies with various banks and a federal political party and various others. So it's been a really interesting journey over the last 5 or 6 years, as I'm sure you can imagine, with the various socials that constantly are evolving. And just, I guess, just so your listeners, when I talk social media, I talk 6 key social media. So for me, those 6 are your LinkedIn personal profile, your LinkedIn company, Facebook owns Instagram, Twitter, then Google My Business, and Google owns YouTube. So they're the 6 that I typically think of when I'm talking social media. And so effectively, as I mentioned, I found myself just really helping small business. There's a lot of us, 2 million across Australia or more, really just getting their setup correct in the first place so that they could proof their business. And so yeah, realistically, it's been a great journey, and I've certainly learned a lot. And I guess the best thing is I've worked with a few hundred businesses now, which I would never have imagined when I went back to study marketing, and thinking I would probably lob myself into one company or an agency type business. But it's really given me an amazing exposure to particularly that micro and small business owner, and some of the challenges that they find when it comes to the world of social media.
So why don't we start there, Steve, in terms of our conversation today. You work with, as you say, you've worked with hundreds of businesses who are entering this space. So when you first encounter a new client, when you go in and you do a diagnostic on their business and you look at where they're at with their web and their social media strategy, what are the most common issues that you uncover in the clients that you first encounter? What do you see as being some of the errors and mistakes that they're making with their web/social strategies?
Yeah, well, I think probably to start with, the key word there is strategy, and there often isn't a strategy, realistically. And surprisingly, it's not just small business. Social media, because of its newness, my sense is that unless you were under 30 in 2008 or single, then really Facebook started to probably wasn't part of your life. So for most small business owners, particularly the mature small business owner, let's say 45 years and over, social media has had very little impact on their success or lack of success. So it's a real new area. So it's often an afterthought, I guess, is probably the first thing. So the first mistake is, we talk about a social media marketing/marketing communications house, and at the end of the day, social media is just one channel that you can use to communicate with your target audience. That said, if it doesn't sit within the business strategy and an overall marketing strategy, then there's the old saying that good advertising, good marketing communications makes a bad business fail faster. So often you need to make sure that all the other elements are in order. So realistically, you need to be running a good business, because otherwise you can be found out fairly quickly if you then apply a really good social media marketing and Facebook advertising strategy. So that's the first point, is that clearly social media is going to be more effective with businesses that have a plan and have a strategy around how they're going to grow and really gain competitive advantages for their business with their marketing communications. As far as probably you mentioned mistakes and opportunities, and marketers love talking about problems. And so the problems often that are encountered is that we'll initially go in, and the first thing you want to do, and when we do an audit, the first thing we do is we put in specifically the business name, right? So what we want to see is, we could probably use the Marketers Club, right? If the business name's Marketers Club, well, we put in the Marketers Club, and what comes up? So we want to see whether or not that we're going to see a Google My Business map, and whether or not there's any reviews around that. Now, I would suggest in the main, maybe 50% of businesses have it. Often people need to claim their Google business because the Google car might have gone around and mapped them, and if they're a bricks and mortar business, and yet it still hasn't been claimed. So that's the first thing, is that actual fact, are you searchable for your name? So despite being a social guy, are you searchable for your name? The second thing is obviously what we're looking at. You'd expect that you'd see the website fairly prominent for your business name. And then it's always interesting what is actually next prominent, and it often surprises people. It may well be their Facebook page, but often it can be their LinkedIn company. And particularly when you put in your own name nowadays. Obviously, if you put in Paul McCarthy, marketer, then you'd hope to come up pretty high, but largely you'll come up around your LinkedIn side of things. So then we go to the website, and there's all sorts of things that we look at as far as the website, and we can expand on those. But one of the things from a social media perspective, we look at social proofing. And so I often explain to people, social proofing on your website is a little bit like a restaurant proofing themselves for that they've got customers and the right customers, right? So I live in Footscray, back onto West Footscray, and Barclay Street Village has a fantastic line of Indian restaurants, Dosa Corner, Dosa Hut, and it's incredible that you can walk along that street and there'll be certain restaurants that will have people lining up out the door, and there'll be other restaurants that may only have one or two people sitting on tables in them. And so realistically, there's no discernible difference from the outside why one would be better than the other. So clearly it's just reputational and relational. And so social media is a little bit like that. And so what I then do is I'll have a look at, from a social context, is there any of the social icons represented on the site? For us, that should be up the top right with where you can see how you telephone and email a business, because realistically, it's another way you can communicate with a business. And look, every now and again, people might have a Facebook or their Instagram put on their website. Often it's very hard to get to. You might find it right down the bottom and you have to scroll to it. But yeah, so realistically, that's the first thing, is that are your social channels identified on the website? There is also some plugins that you can put in there to show that you're an active social, you know, that you're a business that's happy to communicate, and it's two-way communications now with social. So, so is there this, you know, the Facebook plugin, for instance, that shows other people, other like customers that are following your page, that shows the sorts of information and communication that you're sharing to your target audience? And so, yeah, from a web to social, that's probably what we would look at. And then I guess the next thing from that is actually looking at the socials themselves. And generally speaking, people often need a little bit of assistance around branding. Whilst they're all templated, it is amazing how often you'll see people that will put their a nice picture of a cover photo where the profile should be, which is your logo, and a picture of a printed image where your you know, where a nice real image should be, right? So for instance, what we're looking at the moment, this screen, our guide for today's how-to masterclass. Often what works well in print or PowerPoint doesn't work well on social media, right? Social media is about real people, real places. Whilst there's a black and white picture of me, at the end of the day, this would be a much better, and in actual fact, even from a webinar context, it'd probably be better even if you and I are just talking to one another in a way, because people, that sort of attracts people. They want to see that, you know, and they'll judge it as well, right? There's two bald blokes talking about marketing at the end of the day. But, you know, realistically, social media, all about real image, real place, because remembering where it's sitting in people's news feeds, and in news feeds, what are we sharing? We're sharing images and videos of our experiences with friends and family. And so as businesses, if we're all of a sudden smacking in something that's full of graphic design over the top of it, it reeks of advertising and trying to sell something. And so often that's a common mistake, is that people put graphics all over their imagery and their, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or which tend to be the main two, although even increasingly now on their on LinkedIn. So again, it just firstly, there's a knock on the algorithms, but secondly, it tends to repel in any case. So the social media channel is really important from a setup perspective, just to make sure they're branded on brand, which is the profile picture, and then everything else can really, you know, you've generally got your profile image and the name of the business. Everything else can just be real imagery, real time, or not necessarily real time, but you know, real imagery. And when I say real imagery, if it has to be stock imagery, so be it. But this, at the same time, that works a lot better than heavily graphic or what would work well on print, but as I said, just doesn't work so well in social world.
So there's a disconnect sometimes in the translation of information, so we need to be mindful of the different platforms, and I often hear people talking about even the communication on social platforms can be very different. Obviously there's different mediums in terms of video and so forth. If you're YouTubing or whether you're writing images and so forth with Insta, but they also have Insta stories and so forth now, so there's a lot more drive towards the video side. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
Steve, in terms of you mentioned obviously that someone of my vintage that I didn't grow up with social media, and so it wasn't part of my focus. And when I first came into business, so it's something that you have to follow. But what I see, or what I hear a lot with entrepreneurs, and which I think connects to the lack of strategy, is that the driving reason to be involved in social media is because it seems everybody's involved in social media. So it's almost like I better get on board rather than I have a clear purpose of why I'm getting on board. So in terms of just addressing this area of mindset, if you like, talking to this 45 plus entrepreneur, so that we have come to the table and are discovering social media, and it's not necessarily our natural mechanism for communication. So what are the shifts that we need to make from a mindset point of view to understand the value of this, and not to see it as something that is a waste of our time or energy? So what's the shifts that we need to make mentally to go, okay, these are why strategically I need to have this as part of my business and marketing mix?
Yeah, look, and as you said, our vintage. So particularly that 40-something male, which is a high percentage of business owner, and particularly if you go to business networking events, there is a very high percentage of 40-plus male, which is interesting because we're often attending breakfast now, listening to these spectacular successes of entrepreneurial females. And those entrepreneurial females often are using the social media channels as a real catalyst for their success. But getting back to your point is, how do we have to change the mindset? Ultimately, I think, and I should point out, this isn't about, people often get confused with social media and becoming a key person of influence, such as yourself, Paul. There is a lot of people that see social media as a vehicle, a bit like writing a book, is that it's an opportunity to show your level of expertise and specialization. Indeed, I guess what we're doing today does that, right? But that's not the sort of social media marketing that I'm talking about. I'm talking about business social media marketing, where you're about educating your target audience, what it is and why it is they should be considering your services and products. So as I mentioned at the start, marketing communications posts across the various social media channels, generally speaking, are about education. Some businesses are lucky, they have a crossover into entertainment, right? So that, I have a couple of clients. I have a pet photography business, a lady that I've just started to that has vanity mirrors. I have a cottages down towards Lawn. Those sort of businesses can afford to show, imagery and video that kind of people will go, oh, that's a great photo of a puppy, or that's a fantastic view of the national park. So it's still educating, but there's no real need to sort of necessarily get a lot more information. But what often is required, if you're in a professional service, is that firstly you want to get that visibility and credibility by the real imagery, but at the same time you want to explain and let them know where they can get more information. Yes, the Reserve Bank has just lowered interest rates. So that's a reasonable message to put out on your socials, but there's an element of so what, right? So if you're going to put that out on your social media, if you're a mortgage broker, then the next step has to be, why should you then talk to me about what that means for your current mortgage, or if you're looking at investing in a home and seeking to get funding for a mortgage? So often what happens is the actual marketing post, whether it's an advertised post or a promotional post, fails to sort of apply the sort of so what test, right? So often people think that social media is just nice, right? But it may well be, it's definitely that first opportunity that you have to advise and educate your target audience. But then there needs to be some very minor call to action that sort of says, look, if you want to find out a little bit more around this, we have, go to this page of the website, or go to that page, or give me a call, or come on in. So often people will expect, and I see this a little bit, right, where people spend quite a lot of money on the content. So they might spend it, whether it's a book or a video, but they kind of expect that to communicate and sell itself. Believe me, people won't watch the 30-second video with no copy in the post, right? People will watch 3 seconds of it. If it's got subtitles, then hopefully there's more chance that they'll actually know what you're talking about. But generally speaking, we've been taught, we know to read the post, right? So if you write then a little bit of copy, here's Paul sharing on X. To find out a little bit more about the Marketers Club, give us a call or visit the website. And by the way, here's our current offer if you've got an offer, if that's applicable. And often that's maybe more for your advertising type messages. But yeah, it's really important, I think, that serious businesses take social seriously. So you're getting back to the 40-something man, that's often, it's a little bit, typically, what do they say? I think skeptical you can work with, but cynical is difficult. So the skeptics, often when you're working, and as you said, they know they need to be on it. It's good to then be able to show what expectations should look like. And that can be hard because there's a bit of education, there's quite often a high education to sort of say, well, okay, well, what would it mean if you've got 1,000 more people looking at your communications every month? What does it mean if you've got 100 more people going through your website every month? And ultimately that's what we're trying to achieve.
So let's talk about that, Steve, in terms of expectations. And I think that this is one of the lines that cause people constellation. They're unsure of the measurable value of the return on investment that they're going to get from their social media activity. So in your case, members might want to reach out to you to get some help to manage this process for them and have someone guiding that process, which would be a smart move if they don't have the space and time to dedicate to themselves. But in terms of expectation, whether they're doing it or they have engaged a company like yours to help them do it, what's reasonable for people to expect? What are their measures of success? What are they aiming for? Because I think that if you start with a deluded idea that social media is going to be, and I hear it from clients all the time about, I put up this post or I promoted this thing and I got crickets, or nobody bought the ticket, or whatever it is that they were trying to do. So let's talk a little bit around this whole idea of expectation. What we should be aiming to do, because I think we also live in a world of people with very limited patience. That entrepreneurs particularly, are very impatient. They want results yesterday. So how do you educate and manage your clients around what they should expect from their social media output?
Yeah, so I should probably preface the two most common states for small business, and this is kind of noted largely in there's the annual Yellow social media report in terms of how consumer or public use social media by comparison to how small business use social media. So the two most common would be that, and probably the most common, given that 50% of small businesses simply don't use it, is that there is zero or too little time and too little dollars spent. So that's the extreme, where effectively businesses just simply aren't using it. The other extreme, so and just so you know, as I said, 50% of businesses simply aren't on it. Of those 50%, less than 20% have ever spent an advertising dollar. So often, if you're in a world of talking to entrepreneurs, you can start thinking that there might be more people doing it than there actually is. But realistically, those people that have done enough of it would know that the algorithm over the years has gone down, you know, from maybe, let's say, 40 to 50% of your target audience seeing your posts on a regular basis to, you know, nowadays in Australia, and most of my clients would have 10% of their following seeing a post on a daily basis. So the first thing is I talk about posting schedule. So for us, we're posting on a daily basis. For a small to medium client, we're doing morning and afternoon. But that's only because they have two customer bases they're trying to talk to. In the main, one post a day, and in Australia, we're lucky if we, for professional service particularly, anything beyond a 10% of your following, and I'm talking about Facebook here, which is 70% of the businesses, you know, that's realistically, or sorry, I should say 90% of businesses, if they're using social, they're using Facebook. And now that Facebook owns Instagram, they're also, if they're doing any advertising, they effectively have the opportunity to do it to both. So that's the first thing, is how much should you post? Again, people often will get constipation around posting, so they won't post bugger all. If you're only posting once a week, or if you're posting once a month, well, clearly you're going to probably get better than 10% of your audience. If you start posting more than once or twice a day, you get a knock on the algorithm again. So effectively and I've seen this with real estate businesses. In fact, we worked with one real estate agent where we were posting every second day and advertising. Their company, which had 4 branches, were posting 7 or 8 times a day and not advertising. Now that one sales rep became 3 times the size of the company within 6 weeks. And so we moved from promoting his page to promoting his service and listings, right? So very quickly, individuals can become quite successful. But more's the point, how often do you post? No more than twice a day. Secondly, how much should you spend? Which I guess is often the juxtapose, you know, what most people will ask me is the most common question: how much should I spend? Well, again, my answer is often it depends, but what we start our services off, we suggest they spend no less than $5 a day, right? It just depends what campaign you're going to run. So the first campaign, if you're starting from base camp, rock bottom, then really you want to promote your page in the first instance, right? So you've actually got some following so that they're going to organically see some of your posts. The second thing that you may be, depending on the type of business, if you're a local business, the local barber, the local accountant, then awareness may simply be a good way of promoting your business. You get a lot of reach, but you won't get much engagement. And then the third campaign is around promoting an offer or you know, what makes us unique. And that's the most common campaign that we do. The good thing, and you know, as Facebook grows and continues to do good things, you know, now rather than necessarily promoting page, we promote offer, and then you can invite people that like the offer to like the page, and so that's a good thing. So again, we start with, we suggest no less than $5 a day. I think I might have mentioned to you off air, you know, I've got a couple of clients at the moment, one that has a couple of clients that make good case studies, right? One that sells a $15,000, perhaps once in a generation type purchase that you would buy, and the other one that sells a $1,500 type product. One had expectations spending $5 a day and was disappointed, and that was the $15,000 product, was disappointed that within 2 months really they hadn't made the sale, right? So, and that's despite getting some fairly good insights around, you know, there was getting good reach, quite good engagement and good numbers back to the website. So my suggestion to that particular person was that, do you think that the call to action is strong enough on the website? Do you think that, you know, the value that you're suggesting that product has, is that just your company's best value product, or how does it compare in the market? Do you think that you should add your phone number on the website to ensure that people can actually call you to speak about that $15,000 product, because I think they're probably going to want a bit of reassurance, right? So often it's not the social media that's the issue, but the expectation becomes, well, I'm spending $15 to $20 a day on management and advertising. Why aren't I selling any products yet? So the second one is at the other end of the spectrum. And in fact, I turned their spend down from around about $70 to $80 a day down to about $40 to $50. But I just sharpened the audience, right? So effectively, they're reaching last month over 800,000 people, right? And the flares to the website are over 60,000. They're moving towards $1 million turnover a year business. So it's a kind of interesting. So again, it's just they're spending 10 times, but the result is well infinitable more, right? In terms of, because that expectation is a real expectation for them. Sure, their product might be a far easier transaction, being a $1,500 product by comparison to a $15,000 product. But at the end of the day, they are right to have expectation that says, if I spend $50 a day, then I'm wanting to turn over a high level of product. I want this can't not work, right? So anyway, I hope that helps. Realistically, so ultimately, the main thing to consider is how often are you posting? I suggest at least once a day, at minimum at least once every second day. And in actual fact, on Wednesdays, which is today, for those that get this recording later, we actually just go in as the client and we actually be social on their wall. So we sort of connect and make and engage with strategic others, and we'll share something from the strategic others, which we call ambush social media marketing, which kind of is a win-win-win, because often it's sharing information to a page that wouldn't have otherwise been seen. And so realistically, it's important to post consistently, and it's important to advertise. Ultimately, at the end of the day, because of Facebook's algorithm nowadays, if you're expecting to just post and not promote, then realistically, you'll be okay in terms of educating and perhaps retaining your existing audience, but you're unlikely to attract any new audience. And so, that day-to-day posting is great for retention, and great for keeping on top of people's mind. But you really need to move into Facebook advertising, which includes Instagram, which is so advanced nowadays in terms of tagging products, and particularly if you've got e-commerce type websites. Realistically, you've got a whole new audience that you can attract and move to whatever opportunity it is that you're affording people.
So thanks, Steve. That's a great answer, and very insightful in terms of where we should be spending our energy and getting some sense of budgets around that. It strikes me that in terms of the measurement of success, I remember when I owned a call center and was educating telemarketers back 100 years ago, that we would never think about a call as the whole call. We would break it down into its beats, into moments. There were elements of it that they may be good at one section. They might be great getting the conversation started, keeping the person on the line, getting into some sort of discussion or survey. They might be great at transitioning to the offer. They might be great at making the sale, or they might be great at capturing the referral opportunity out of it, whatever it was, but they might have a weak spot. So we tried to always look at it in its elements rather than as in its totality. And I think that what you're suggesting to us is that we need to be thinking a little bit like that in terms of our social media activity, that sometimes maybe it's working in terms of getting the reach, it's getting the exposure, it might be getting people to the website, but then it might be falling down. So the social media might be doing its role very well, but the end sale not being there for a whole range of other reasons. So we do need to be mindful, by the sound of it, about the nature of the complete offerings and the mechanics of what we're doing when we're posting.
Yeah, and I think just on your point, for me, the website really is integral, particularly for your startup type businesses. I'll often sit down with people and sort of say, look, we can't work together at this stage, but you know, here's a couple of people that you might want to speak to about getting that website with the content and the sort of information that helps educate and promote your business, so that I've then got something to work with regards to you know, using the particular strategy that we use, which is a repurposed web content type strategy. So we ask that our clients think website first. So if they're getting the video done, then put the video on the website. If they're writing a blog, then write the blog long form on the website. And then, you know, and clearly you have your various services and about us and those sorts of pages. And so it's really important for us that the website is the content house. And certainly it makes our job a whole lot easier, and is the reason that we are able to provide the service that we do at the cost that we charge, is because you know, we anticipate that the content will be available from the website, and we take the website to the people to get them back to the website and or the phone or the front door, if that's the case, and or the email. And I guess probably that's also to your point, you know, social media works a whole lot better when there's you know, when there's already flyer distribution going on, or there's a, you know, you've got an email marketing, or you're doing SEO, or you might be running radio ads. At the end of the day, you know, when I went and studied marketing, we talked about integrated marketing communications, and it's like a fruit salad. And as it turns out, you know, social media is like a strawberry. It's, you know, it can't be the everything of the fruit salad, and it certainly it's nice and juicy by itself. But at the end of the day, if it's complemented by others, it often works a lot better.
So we've covered some great ground. I think one of the other areas I wanted to explore with you, you mentioned you know, the 6 key platforms that you focus on, but I do think that platform selection is an area that people do get bamboozled by, and probably the most common phrase that gets thrown around is be where your audience is. You know, that your choice of which channel is the right channel for you to put energy in is based on where your audience hangs out. So what's your philosophy in relation to clients coming into your world when you're helping them to build a strategy and communicate? You've just talked about the repurposing of content, which is great, so that we're not just producing content. It's one of the philosophies we have in the Marketers Club is, you know, don't create anything once that you can't repurpose and use again. So we need things that are going to increase their shelf life a little. I think they become a little ephemeral, that they last for such a short period of time, a post that we need to be able to repurpose. So when it comes to LinkedIn, Facebook, Insta, Google, YouTube, how do you approach it with a client in terms of their content creation and their channel selection?
Yeah, so I think of it a little bit differently. So at this, whilst I agree you need to be where your target audience is, I suggest the 6 key social media purely on the basis as they're an asset. So increasingly we're moving to you know, transient workplaces, mobile businesses, flexible working hours, all that sort of stuff. And so ultimately online and the online office becomes really important. So for me, I consider the 6 social channels as being assets. So you want to make sure, and that is a brand asset. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you own your Marketers Club name and your Marketers Club URL and your Marketers Club social media username across, or as close to, across all the channels. So again, you know, want to make sure that Marketers Club has a strong presence on LinkedIn. you know, as a brand that, you know, that not just you potentially, you know, it's how people can show that they're have a relationship with the Marketers Club. Having Google My Business, because people want to be able to search it. Having YouTube channel, because, you know, you're going to put up various channels, and you may as well put it on brand and make sure that it's complete as far as all your information and that sort of stuff goes. Clearly, as I've mentioned, Facebook and Instagram are the two key ones that, in the main, this is just Steve talking, at the end of the day, this is what Telstra and what surveys tell us, is that people are on Facebook and on their news feed on a, if not daily, regular basis, and they're all on it. As against, you know, I have, you know, so realistically, where you post through and what you own is slightly different. So, and I've mentioned Twitter as well. So the 6 channels in terms of creating them, I believe are all important. And the only one that I would suggest that, you know, say with Twitter, at the end of the day, is another great tool for placing you both geographically and industry. So you may as well own it. Own the brand on your online presence. So at the end of the day, and Twitter has a whole different algorithm. So everything goes through to the keeper. It's always, you know, all socials are about newsfeed and getting into newsfeed. And so particularly the old boys, they confuse that, right? So often the education is, if you understand how a newspaper works, will you effectively understand how social media works? It's about getting into people's newsfeed. It's not about creating a substitute website. And if anybody goes to the insights page of their Facebook, so your Facebook page, and you look at insights, you will generally see that there is not too many people visiting your Facebook page. Hopefully, you'll also see that there's plenty of people that are seeing your posts in their newsfeed and engaging with them. So essentially, people often confuse, as I said, they are websites in their own right, but their function is different. So, so I think, to your point, we post on a daily or every second day to Facebook, Instagram, and the LinkedIn company. As far as Google's concerned, we make sure that we're uploading posts and images at least on a monthly basis, just because it's Google, right? And as far as Twitter, we just make sure that integrates. There's a good little tool, a good little hack that's called If This Then That, and you can make it that when you post to Instagram, then that goes from Instagram to Twitter, or you can send it all sorts of ways with different things. But that's a good little way if people are using a scheduling tool, or we use Hootsuite to schedule our posts, and you're only wanting to use 3 of the channels, which is actually where it cuts out for free use. Then a tool like If This Then That is a good little one as far as getting it to post elsewhere. But, you know, to your point, yes, your audience is probably more likely to be on one channel or the other, but that channel is probably Facebook, because in the main, you know, I do speak to a lot of business to business and say, well, okay, LinkedIn. The only issue with LinkedIn is, you know, compared to 17 million Australians on it, there's only 5 million Australians. And of those 5 million, how often they're checking their newsfeed? I reckon only 10 to 20% would be checking their newsfeed. And I think a lot of them are people like you and me, who often want to stand out within their industry, and/or they're job seekers. So I find LinkedIn is a fantastic way, particularly in the world that I'm in, you know, to attract interest of people to work with and collaborate with.
Yeah, great. No, thank you. That's great advice. So, so that hack, If This Then That, is that's the website, ifthisthenThat.com. Is that where people go?
IFTT, I think it is. If This Then That. Yeah, IFTT.
IFTT.com. No, that's great. So that's a good little hack for people to be able to jump onto. We're kind of coming up on time, Steve. So I'm just thinking about any other elements of this journey for small business owners, looking at their web, their social, their strategy, how to combine them better. Any, I guess, questions that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that would help our listeners to and members to understand how to be more effective with their time and with these assets?
I think as we speak, I'm making sure that I have in front of me my infographic guide. So it's just a one-pager, Paul. So realistically, more or less the journey that we've talked about is in many ways summarized in a one-pager that I'm more than happy to share with you. And if you want to share with anybody that's interested, that sort of just is a little flow chart that we look at as far as social media marketing. Clearly, we provide that with people when we're doing audits and that sort of stuff, but happy to share that with the Marketers Club if that's of interest.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, we'll make sure that that's made available so that everybody can get their hands on that infographic. That would be a great asset for them to have. So, look, it's been a great conversation, and I think you've brought a lot of clarity to the whole thing, and I think that that's really where it starts. I think that one of the challenges here is that many entrepreneurs are dabbling in spaces and therefore not fully invested in the strategy, and therefore get very limited results or evidence of benefit from it because they're not properly invested into the strategy. So I think it's a kind of a all in or all out kind of conversation from the sound of it. So and certainly being able to do it. But of course, if people find themselves that they understand the mechanics of it now, they understand what's required, but they themselves don't want to execute that, or they would like to have a company like yours helping them to do that. How is it, and what's the best way for people to reach out to you, Steve, learn more about the services that you offer in terms of helping people to get better results with their web and social media connection?
Yeah, well, clearly, I'd love introduction by LinkedIn. Happy to connect with people on LinkedIn, Steve Hubbard, and then the Diffy Social, DIFY, that's do it for you, social.com.au website, or the various social media channels. I'm a firm believer of that we've got to be our own best customers. So happy to receive people's feedback with regards to Diffy Social's social media marketing, and yeah, but also happy to receive direct messages. We take appointments from the Facebook page. You can message us via the website. So yeah, more than happy to start a conversation with any of the listeners there today. Yeah, and provide whatever assistance I can.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. And Steve, offers as part of his business mix an audit process, so you can dive in. So I'd certainly be engaging in a conversation, having a chat to him, and maybe taking it that next step and stepping in to do an audit to really understand the assets that you've got and how they can start to be improved and grow your reach and engagement with people through these channels so that you can maximize your ability to grow your business. So thank you so much, Steve, for making the time. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and certainly made lots of notes for things for me to go back and check for us and for the Marketers Club. So I've learnt a lot from the conversation as well. So appreciate you making the time.
Awesome, Paul. Thank you for having me on.
No, a pleasure, mate. All right, folks, well, that's it for this session, and I'm actually working on a final guest for the year in terms of our last how-to session. So I can't announce who that is just yet because I'm in discussions, but it is Wednesday, the 6th of November, that will be reconvening for our last one of the year. So I will keep you informed as soon as I've got that. Then for members, emails will go out to let you know who it's going to be, so you know what we're going to be chatting about. So save the date, and otherwise you will be able to catch up in the members only section where you'll be able to listen to the recording. So thanks everyone for joining me today, and for Steve especially for taking the time out. Really appreciate that, and appreciated all of the really valuable information shared in today's session. So I wish you all the very best of luck, continued success, and I will talk to you all again soon. Okay, bye for now.